Thanks, Emily. Yes, as you can see from Harry's background, Harry works for BokLok. I think I've pronounced that right, which is a developer of modular housing, which, believe it or not, is what is behind Harry.
Yeah.
Harry, you've been in the property sector and working with refugees for a number of years. I wonder if you could just give us a sort of an outline of the situation more broadly, housing in the UK.
Yeah, no problem. Well, as the others have said, thanks so much for having me, guys. It's been amazing hearing from everyone else and their perspectives and what they're doing. And this might seem a little bit, this is probably a bit more long term, sort of looking at housing in the UK and accommodation for refugees. But I guess a good place to start, as sort of Emily touched on at the beginning, is that housing in the UK is in a really difficult place. And I mean, I can touch on that in just a few points. The government in 2019 pledged to build 300,000 homes a year, and by the mid-2020s. And there have been a lot of reasons why that's been difficult, but that hasn't been a number that we've been able to reach, which means that housing, we're in need of real quality housing. Probably more relevant to families coming over, refugee families coming over, is also our need for really good quality social housing. So social housing in the UK has dropped by about 1.5 million homes since the 1970s. So that's meant that there's been more of a need for temporary accommodation, which where one of the places we're based is in Bristol, and we've seen families in temporary accommodation rise from about 550 in 2018 to over 1,000 now. And so with refugee families coming in as well, that's adding to that number. So it can sound quite bleak, but actually what we're doing, and I'm sure we'll come onto it, but we think that sort of what we're doing and what we're seeing others doing in housing is definitely one of the solutions.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my next question, but you've really outlined the need there, Harry. So what is modular housing, and how can it make a difference to, say, a refugee family?
Yeah, good question. So this is modular housing, or an example of it. So we, as you said, Sam, English people will call us BokLok in the same way that English people will call IKEA, but you pronounce it BokLok, which is live smart in Swedish. And modular housing, or sort of MMC, is but usually built in a factory. So there's lots of different types of MMC. It stands for modern methods of construction. We build ours in a factory, and then we put it on the back of a lorry and take it to site. And these houses behind me are actually two different units. So you've got one on the bottom layer and another one on top. So they're both brought by lorry to site. And why this is really significant is it means that the time it takes to build a site, if all goes to plan, should be reduced by about 40% or 50%. These homes as well are fully timber as well, even though it looks like brick, they're fully timber. So it's just an example of the innovation that's going on in the country. And different European countries are much further ahead than we are. But I think the thing to sort of answer your other question about what's the difference that this can make for refugee families is probably, I'd probably touch on 2 points. Is as I said at the beginning, it's a long game. So whereas the other guests have been talking about things we can do right now, I think this point I'm trying to make is that looking ahead, there is hope, where I think we can look at housing in the UK and sort of wonder, outside of hosting and temporary accommodation, is there really anything that is going on that can bring hope? And there is. A couple of examples of this that we see in Bristol are something called the Gap House, which is where they're trying to build housing where old council garages are for the homeless. And another one is something called Snug Homes, which is another brilliant initiative in Bristol, and they're building sort of community-led homes, and one that's went up 2 years ago, they've got a refugee in there as well. And so it's just examples of where people are trying to go, how can we innovate with housing, and how can we bring in new solutions to the problem that we see in front of us. But just
awesome.
the second point there was just, I think the speed is really exciting. So we're almost there. It's things are looking brighter, if not absolutely there yet, but to do with housing and this crisis, there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and that's really helpful. You talking about sort of future hope. But I do know that you are also doing a number of projects in the south of England with BokLok. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more, if someone had the means or resources or the interest, what would they do how could they explore modular housing? Is it applicable to anyone?
That's a really good question. Before I was with BokLok, I was with another organisation called the Bristol Housing Festival. Obviously, they're in Bristol, but I'd really encourage you to visit their website. They're a company who are working with Bristol City Council to try and innovate in many different ways. So from us, which is volumetric, is a lot of houses, right the way down to single houses, and they're working with several churches in Bristol to see if there's a way that those churches can use their land, even with one house. So I'd say visit places like the Housing Festival, who are really trying to start these things, and to work with companies, work with churches, work with councils. I think the lesson probably from them is just showing where there's a will, there's a way. And what they're sort of seeing is often, as we've spoken about, where there can seem like a lack of hope. What they've sort of seen in Bristol is just because something isn't happening doesn't mean it shouldn't happen. Just because we don't see these solutions coming about doesn't mean they can't. And really, through a lot of effort and a lot of prayer, they're starting to see things happen. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, but I'd say if you're wanting to know more about maybe what you can be doing or your church can be doing in a real sense, the Bristol Housing Festival are a great place to go to.
Thank you, Harry. No, that's really helpful. And yeah, we've posted a number of different websites that should provide even more information, especially on modular housing and costs and sizes. And that's not the only style of housing that you do, is it, Harry?
No, we do apartments as well. And I should say with BokLok, this is more on the development side, and we do a large amount of affordable housing as well. But MMC spans, like I said, from this size of development right along to one or two houses. So yeah, it's quite exciting.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it.